started. Then, why don't I bring up Jocelyn to take it away, and then we'll hear from Brett. We'll ask questions of both of them, then we'll bring up Ted for his piece of the puzzle. A rousing applause for our city manager, please.
Magic clicker. That way, okay, perfect. Fantastic. Is my mic?
I'm going to turn it up.
Turn it up a little? Okay. I can be loud, but it's better with the mic. Testing it now. How about now? Is that better? Yeah? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Very pleased to be here this morning with all of you. And I think, as Peter's already alluded to, it is provincial election day in British Columbia. But you are here doing your civic duty as part of the Assembly. And I just want to comment on the feeling in the room, the wonderful questions, the excellent comments. And when my mayor came back from meeting with all of you, she said you were an amazing group, up for the task, and that we really have the right people in the room. And Peter, thank you for booking this amazing space and just, I think, providing this kind of conversational, relaxed way to talk about some very complex issues that we're all grappling with. Peter alluded to my two colleagues at the back, Brent from Saanich and Ted from the CRD. We're very collegial, very collaborative. We're all dealing with the same problems, but we are all separate entities at this point in time. So I'm hoping that my presentation can provide some context, some nuance to how Victoria is different. So you'll see a lot of similarities in some areas and then differences, and can add to your conversation as we go along. So I want to start by saying Peter already did a bit of a land acknowledgement, but we are very fortunate in Victoria to work very closely with the Songhees and Kasapsum nations, the Lekwungen-speaking peoples. We have a very unique model that we call the city family, which is comprised of elected officials, members of both nations. It is a very non-colonial approach to reconciliation. It's very organic. It has provided a kind of insight and intel for us to be able to put on things like the reconciliation dialogues. I don't know if some of you have attended those in years past, but we feel that we are at a very good and constructive moment with our nations, and true partners. I think we really feel like we are true partners with them in how we build and evolve our city in the years to come. So municipal demographics, who are we? What do we look like? We've already talked about the 13 municipalities that make up the CRD. We have 13 neighborhoods in Victoria. Our estimated population for 2024 is 95,717. Just a few years ago in 2021, we were at 91,867. So that's growth of about 4.2% over the last 3 years. Our daytime population grows as people commute into Victoria. We have about 40,000 people that commute in. We have about 15,000 that commute out. So depending on whether you've been going out to West Shore or coming into the city, sometimes you'll see those traffic volumes. Our average age is 45.2. The bulk of our folks fall into that 15 to 64 category. 39% of our folks aged 25 to 64 have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's compared to 35% in BC and 32.9% in Canada. So we're a little bit ahead there. And half of our youth, age 18 to 24, are attending post-secondary. And that's just slightly higher of the average in Canada. We have about 49,000 households in Victoria with a median income of $67,500. Most of our folks are renters, 60%. So rental, availability of rental units is a big thing for us in the city. Almost half of our households have only one person living in it. And about 3/4 of Victorians identify as European. In terms of our visible minority, our newcomers to the city, the breakdown, we have most are from Chinese descent, South Asian, Filipino, Black, American, Latin American, Southeast Asian, Japanese, Korean, Arab, and West Asian. And 5% of folks in Victoria identify as Indigenous, and that matches the national average. So our municipal economy, Victoria is home to a lot of government workers, and often we're thought of as a government town. But we also have a lot of industry sectors that are have a global reach and global impact. Tech replaced tourism about a decade ago as the number one sector. Generates about $5.8 billion a year with a total economic impact of almost $8 billion. Employs about 20,000 skilled workers through 1,172 firms, and they just keep growing. I don't know if you're familiar with Viatech. They are kind of the industry association for tech. They have a building on Fort Street called Fort Tectoria. They've outgrown that space. They're looking for more space. Just keeps going. Tourism industry, marine, and coastal industries are really the top three for us in terms of economic growth in Victoria. And as was captured in some of the summaries, Victoria is really the tourism hub for Vancouver Island by land, air, and sea. We have over 4 million visitors visiting Victoria annually, bringing about $1.3 billion into our economy. And about $2.3 billion in the multiplying economic impact. That generates about $376 million in tax revenues and supports over 22,000 jobs. And we also have a large number of workers in the retail and hospitality sectors. So drilling down a little further, we also have prominence in healthcare, professional services, retail, education, construction, and administration. As the capital, the majority of public service worker offices are in Victoria. We do lament the fact that the province hasn't had all of their folks come back down to the offices to work. Some of our small businesses are really suffering because of that. But there you go. And also as a coastal city, I think you've probably heard the term blue economy. Victoria is becoming a kind of a hub of ocean network, as well as industrial, marine, industrial businesses, supports innovation and development of that sector. We have a focus currently on protecting our industrial lands for that purpose. You've probably heard of C-SPAN, RELMAX, Ocean Networks Canada, and we're well positioned to become a world leader in ocean-based technology and earn what is forecast to be a $3 trillion global economy by 2030. So that's a growing area. And just having come out of Small Business Week last week, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our wonderful community of artists, bakers, artisans, performers. They really are an amazing kind of cultural element that we have in Victoria, and they make up a big part of our vibrant small business ecosystem. So Victoria itself, we have about 1,200 city staff. That does not include Vic PD, Victoria Police Department. We have seen kind of a demographic shift over the last 5 years, very similar to other industries where you have a lot of long tenured older workers retiring, infused by newer people coming to work at the city, such that over half of our people now have been with us for less than 5 years, which is great because it brings kind of a whole sense of energy, new ideas, a new way of doing things. It's great. So we joke about, am I a CAO, city manager? I don't know. I think because we have the gritty downtown, I kind of use city manager more than I use CAO. So what are our positions? Well, I am the one employee of council. I ensure that I'm overseeing all of the city's administrative structures, the policy implementation. I am the one advisor to council. I'm very lucky in this term of council. I have a very close relationship with my councilors. I tell them the truth more than I probably should. I have difficult conversations with them. I raise things coming up through staff that may or may not be causing issues. And it's I feel like we're in a good place with this current council. Obviously, there's a large part of my role that is budget and finance oversight. There have been some wonderful questions about, who's moving this work, who's going to make the ultimate decision. I think if there's one thing that we all wouldn't say to be true is that we can't keep doing things the way we're doing them. There is one taxpayer, and we are all suffering from escalating costs, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. But I think, that is a pressure point that we're all feeling very acutely right now. And our budget just published last night, so I'll talk a little bit about that a little further on. And then, of course, personnel management. Everything we do is done by people, a wonderful group of people at the City of Victoria. And so ultimately, it's I'm on the hook for making sure that all of the good, bad, and hard things that are done at the city are done well, and that I am responsible for that. So in terms of our core services and budget, we include a range of ongoing programs that you will see in many municipalities: roads, water, parks, emergency management, solid waste collection, arts and culture programming, and the provision of police services. Every year, council sets service levels and allocates funding for these services and programs. This is informed by community input. So if you look at our budget package that published last night, there's an Ipsos survey that we do. We do a number of roundtables in the community with equity-seeking groups. I think somebody in communications said to me the other day, we have more ways of people to provide input than we ever have in the history of the city. So no end of ability to express opinions to the city about what they should be spending their money on. In addition, we have about 20 master plans that we use to inform where we're spending and what the priorities are at any given point in time. That would include, sewer master plans, underground infrastructure, roads, paving, greenways. So we don't, come to work and decide, okay, this is how I'm going to spend my money today. We have plans that carry us through year over years. And unlike the provincial and federal governments, who receive all kinds of income tax and sales tax, just to name a couple of things, unfortunately, the municipal funding formula was established in 1849 through the Baldwin Act. We get about 8 cents on the dollar, while we own 60% of Canada's infrastructure. And I'm going to be a bit shameless here and just take a moment to talk about the work that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is doing. They are an entity that represents about 2,100 municipalities in Canada, about 92% of Canada's population. They are calling on the federal government and the provincial government to give us more money, essentially. So they are calling on the federal government to modernize municipal funding by tying transfers to population and economic growth, linking them to Canada's GDP. And that would increase direct annual transfers to municipalities by about $2.6 billion. And they are calling on the provinces and territories to modernize municipal funding by agreeing to match the level of funding provided to municipalities by reforming, by allocating a portion of the provincial sales tax or income taxes to municipalities, You'll remember when cannabis came online. I think the city of Victoria expressed an interest back then that we would receive a portion related to kind of our regulation costs at that time. Kind of fell on deaf ears at that point. But it's clear that with the downloading of everything onto municipalities, we are bearing a disproportionate burden related to our taxation and our current formula.
I have a question.
Yes.
Would amalgamation likely increase our ability to negotiate with other levels of government as a larger city and, I don't know,
Like a bigger voice kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I have heard over the years as we've been often applying for federal grants, I've often received feedback saying, if all 13 municipalities or even, 4 core municipalities were behind this idea, it would give it more weight. So I think there is certainly something to be contemplated by having kind of a larger voice at the table or a bigger stake at the table. So in terms of our municipal services, we have over 200 services that range from recreation, road maintenance, water, land use, parks, playgrounds. We are responsible. I've talked a little bit about our assets. Our public assets are estimated to have a replacement value of about $3.6 billion, and we are responsible for stewarding all of that. From my perspective, and this is where you'll see a little bit of the differences in Victoria, we bear a disproportionate amount of costs for things that happen in the downtown core. Every protest, every rally, Canada Day, we just had the Victoria Marathon, everything happens downtown. We bear the costs for all the policing, road closures, all of that. We also have a kind of concentration of all of the social services supports in the downtown core. And so with that, we have increased street disorder. We have folks who are sheltering, that are unhoused, and we bear the cost of a lot of that. We also have things like a conference center, which was built in 1989, way back when it used to be a beautiful a third. It was $27 million back then, kind of the golden days of infrastructure funding. And we're also responsible for a lot of that capital and infrastructure right around the inner harbor, which is, everybody wants it always to be kind of Instagram ready when they come off the cruise ships or off the float planes. And so that's part of what Victoria also contends with.
Question.
Oh, yeah.
Do the disproportionate costs of downtown outweigh the taxes we get from downtown?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm having a blank moment, but somebody asked that question the other day, and yes. I mean, capital expenditures, and I know that my cohorts will have a lot to say about this. It far outweighs the taxation that we derive from those businesses. But yeah, thank you for that question. Transportation. So we think about transportation in a municipality involving a combination of public transit, roads, active transportation, parking, traffic management, kind of all working to ensure people as well as goods and services move through in a very efficient way. I have a number of props back on my table, but one of them that I brought along in case anybody wanted it is the city's mobility strategy. So Go Victoria was adopted in 2019. And it was the kind of underpinning of that document is really about the interconnectedness and interdependencies of all of the mobilities in Victoria. So whether it's bike lanes or roads or bus routes, I think it was a way to kind of bring it all together and to try and see what common values we could bring together around how we plan for mobility in the city. We have a very close relationship with BC Transit because obviously bus route planning and efficiencies there are very important to Victoria. We're also working very closely with them right now around Bill 47, which is the transit-oriented development, which is, of course, building transit next to densified housing, which, of course, makes sense. But that's another kind of layer of planning that we're engaged in currently. We've also, we were the leader around developing bike lanes, took it on the chin for many, many, many years, even to this point when people say bike lanes, I kind of twitch a bit. But I think you've seen around the region, people have also taken up that cause, and it just makes my heart sing when I see connectivity around, thanks for Shelburne, Brent, just great areas, because I think, part of what we're trying to achieve through climate change, obviously, is to get people out of their cars. We've also taken the lead on EV charging. So if you've been into any of our parkades, pretty much every space now in the upper levels have chargers. We're increasing on street. We have our first electric fire truck, which is very cool. And in terms of our harbor, it serves as a water airport. And so there's a kind of planning around, float plane modality. We work very closely with the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority and Transport Canada. And Ogden Point, obviously a major cruise port. We host up to 300 ships a year, have about 1 million people engaged in cruise, about 750 visitors as well as crew. So that's a major consideration for transportation downtown.
Question.
Yeah.
Do we get any money out of the cruise ships coming? I mean, as a city, I'm not talking the businesses that they might buy something at, but
No.
no.
Now there have been ideas about almost kind of a visitation tax, right? That would be built in a little bit like your airport improvement tax. We are still having some of those conversations with GVHA because it is an impact. And if you live in the James Bay neighborhood, you certainly know. Between taxis, I see some people grinning about this. Yeah, taxis, buses. It is an impact. You're right. It is a benefit to businesses downtown. The other thing that we're working very closely on is to have people stay longer. So last year, ships just stayed for a couple of hours. It was the routing. We have some plans afoot. Alaska has kind of maxed out in terms of cruise. And so I think some of our conversations with some of the cruise lines are making it so they might re-alter their routes to stay in Victoria longer, which would be a benefit to us. We're also hoping that someday we will be more of a home port, which means that people would actually stay in the hotels downtown. They'd stay for 3 days, not such a kind of a transient in and out. So transportation, part of Go Victoria was ultimately dealing with a reduction in GHGs, getting people out of their cars, the thing we call mode shift. So how are we doing? Well, at this point, it's still, over half of people, residents commute by car to Victoria, but the bike mode shift has been growing and continues to grow. And if you've seen those counters on our bike lanes, they're always in the thousands, rain or shine. It's quite impressive. So we continue to build our network of almost 100 kilometers of cycling infrastructure. And of those, we have certain sections that are protected, the all ages and abilities with the concrete barriers so that, kids from a young age can be out cycling. 11% of our residents commute by bus, and obviously,
I heard someone else recently saying that actually accidents, because of the bike lanes, accidents went down. I've never heard of this before.
I have not heard that. Let's talk later.
I think that was my question. If
Yeah.
there's numbers like that, could they make public?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would increase the acceptance of bike lanes much, much more.
Yeah, I would. I'd love to get my hands. Well, and actually, our transportation folks probably have that data. But yeah, that would be great, because there's always those growing pains when you put in a bike lane, and people are looking at the bike light versus the traffic light, and you see visitors kind of using it the wrong way, but it would be great.
Also, the numbers of people commuting by bike, I have not seen any like studies or numbers.
No, we do capture those. Maybe we're not doing a good enough job of putting those out, but yeah, very good point. Thank you for that. And of course, walking, we have great, we have 467K of sidewalks in Victoria. We have 130 marked crosswalks and 200 signaled crosswalks. And I'm always blown away by how much money it costs to put in, a light. It's about $500,000 to put in a light. And so, part of it is just always trying to keep up with that infrastructure.
Before you leave transportation,
Yeah.
what about LRT?
Yeah. So I was at a Urban Development Institute lunch, a number of months ago now, while Rob Fleming was still the Minister of Infrastructure and he was the speaker. He was quoting some numbers because, depending on whether it's, downtown to the airport or downtown to uptown and having some kind of rapid transit, the numbers that he shared were astronomical in terms of buildings. So I think what he said was per kilometer for above ground, it was about $500,000 per kilometer. So it would be about $1 billion we assess from downtown to uptown. And then if you have to go below ground, it was about double that. So yes, we'd still love to have that. The question is, would the province pay? How would we pay? Yeah, we are still very much interested in that.
Another question.
Yeah.
If we were to choose to only integrate services, would it be possible to integrate our bike lanes somehow?
I think we kind of are. I'm looking at Brent. Our staff work very closely on the bike network as a whole. I don't know, Brent, I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, I'm just echo that. I think concrete examples beyond what's happening right now on Shelburne Street, our staff,
Yeah.
it's not directly aligned in terms of what we're doing in our respective areas, but our staff are in constant communication. The CRD increasingly is going to play a role in this. Some of you read that they're moving towards an establishing transportation service. And there's Ted can speak to that, I think later when he's up. But that'll provide some broader overarching coordination to some of the work that's going on. One of the other projects we're starting right now is some significant work in the Gorge Alvina area. And we've been in close contact with the engineering group at Victoria to make sure that we're aligned with where the networks are and helping people move around the region very closely. There's a lot of work that goes across municipal borders. Also, the sustainability divisions, I think, is critical here because we both have very strong groups that work on all things related to climate change and reducing our community GHGs and our organizational GHGs. And those groups are very closely intertwined in terms of the work they do. And there's a strong connection between the work of transportation and the work of the sustainability group. So the communication is constant, I think, and attempts to share and integrate as best we can are continually explored by staff.
But to your point, maybe we're not doing a good enough job of kind of promoting it, right, as a CRD piece. So, yeah.
My perception is that there's integration in terms of the planning, but that different municipalities are at different points in terms of actually implementation. So you do run into points where the bike lane here suddenly hits a municipal border and dies, but there is the plan to extend it. It just may not have happened yet.
Exactly. No, that's a very good point. And, yes.
I'm just giving you the 10-minute.
10 minute, okay.
remaining slides.
I think
I'm Brett, and we'll have
You
both of
bet.
them on the hot seat to take lots
You
of
bet.
questions
Okay.
together.
Okay, great. I'll roll on here. Police. Okay, I could spend easily 10 minutes on police, but I won't. Our Victoria Police was established in 1858, serves both the township of Esquimalt as well as the city of Victoria. We are the only amalgamated force in the region. Victoria Police has 353 full-time staff, and they have both kind of sworn officers and civilian. Their budget for this year is about $74.5 million. That's an increase of about 9.71%. They have a large number of calls related to, disorder, calls for kind of health-related services. Victoria pays 86% of all the costs. We have a framework agreement with Esquimalt, which I could also spend 10 minutes on, and I won't. We are in the midst of a divorce because Esquimalt for some time has wanted to have their own police division. So those studies are ongoing in terms of where they're going to go and what that's going to look like. They're envisioning currently to have a kind of a small core that would be the Esquimalt Police Department, and then contracted services with either Saanich or Victoria. And there may be other questions, but maybe we'll save those till later. Community planning, I won't steal the thunder of my planners who will be coming to see you at a future meeting, but obviously the OCP provides a long-term vision of what our city is going to be looking like and how we accommodate all kinds of growth, where we locate housing, businesses, and how we respond to climate change. So our first OCP was adopted in 2012. We're doing a refresh currently. That will be reported back to council early in the new year. It's really a vision to 2050, where we're going to have a population of about 142,000 people. I think we're looking at something that's quite, what would I say, revolutionary in a way. We're looking at increasing density in a very kind of gentle, low-rise form. Think of Paris, if you've been there, so 6-story everywhere. We are, we're also trying to look at where we have a shortfall of housing, future projections for needed housing. Between now and 2050, we need about 35,000 units, which is no easy task. So, and also looking at how do we continue to have the quality of life that we have with our parks and, our mobility, our urban forest, all of that. Community planning, obviously zoning, once the OCP is adopted and council makes their decisions around that, all of those decisions then are enshrined in zoning bylaws. And obviously we have in Victoria, we are a built out city. We're very dense. We have a lot of spot zoning. Your developer friend probably told you a lot about that. We're trying to condense that down, kind of make sense of it. Even on the map here, you can see that we have 22 urban place designations. We've got things like, we've got complexity that some other municipalities might not have. We have Inner Harbor, Marine, Heritage, our legislative precinct. So we have a lot of different things to think about there. 5-year infrastructure and fiscal lookout. Last night, as I say, we just published our budget package. The numbers that you see here do not include Crystal Pool. They do not include an enhanced central public library. We're just starting our budget process. We are going to have our first meeting on Thursday with council where we present them with the budget. They take it away, they digest it. We will have our first proper kind of discussion on the budget on November 4th. We're starting with a double-digit number, which is always problematic. So I think there will be an exercise in where can we cut, where can we find ongoing savings into the future to try and relieve the burden on the taxpayer. So our current budget is projected at $365 million. That's for operating, about another 94 for capital. What else do I want to say here? I think something that is common to both Brent and Ted and I is just this idea of trying to reduce tax burden, taking out of reserves, kicking the can down the road in terms of, okay, don't put it in there now, let's try and relieve the tax rate, but then things get more expensive and you have less money to do things. So an example would be in 2020 when COVID was full on in Victoria, our council decided to hold the line at zero. And so now we are 20 million short in terms of additional money for capital upgrades. So the impacts are ongoing.
Question on that one, sorry.
Yes.
What do those percentages refer to on the table? What are those increases?
Those are increases, unfortunately. Yes.
Just to say,
Oh, sorry.
That says that over the next 5 years, the taxes are going up by 50%.
That is, that's the calculation. I mean, it's compounded. It's kind of a forever thing, which people think about things in terms of a one time, but it's levied on an ongoing basis. So it's a challenge. Revenues, we are, other than property taxes, we do have utilities, which are basically self-financing. We have additional revenue sources from parking, construction permits, recreation fees, the Victoria Conference Center, business licenses, and property leases. We have a real estate division at the City of Victoria. Expenditures. Well, you'll see the big blue piece, that's salaries and benefits, because unfortunately it's all about people delivering the services, so it's all tied back to that. So that is and continues to be our largest component. You'll see the salmon color is transfer to reserves and capital at 17%. I'm just picking out the biggest things to talk about here. Contracted services. Essentially, we're seeing ongoing pressures. I know inflation is kind of balancing out a little bit, but cost escalation continues to happen related to supply chains, the fact that we live on an island. We only have a certain amount of contracting resource to draw on. So it's a challenge.
Question. Short one. Sorry
Yes.
for all the questions.
Yes, it's all good.
Do you think that amalgamating will save us money in the long run?
So I can't wait till the bear pit. I'm looking forward to this. Here's what I would say. I would say people are paid the same. It costs the same to pave roads wherever they are. Efficiencies, I think, I have to say we've already imagined, okay, what if we have one fire service and we have, would you need less people? Would you need less equipment? Would you need different equipment? You'd need cross-training. It's a really big question that you're posing, right? Because it's all about service levels. So at the end of the day, it comes down to what does that service level look like? And if we're all at the same service level with the same staff and the same equipment, you're not really saving any money. But it's a big question. It's a good question.
Very
Yes.
small.
Yeah.
And not as big as that.
That is kind of the big question, right?
Of the circle, the half circle of staffing and cost, could you,
Yeah.
go back to the presentation again, what percentage of that is related directly to council? Or staff, mayor and council,
Oh, a tiny. You mean their
Yeah.
salaries? Oh, very tiny.
and the operations of,
Yeah, most of this is QP50. Most of it is outside workers. So of our 1,200 people, we've probably got like 70 exempt managers that do all the kind of strategic work. It's mostly outside workers. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
Just quickly.
Yeah.
I presume that blue also includes the fire and police salaries?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Okay, major issues. These are right out of the Ipsos survey that we did. It's a very hard time for people. People are worried about housing, whether they can keep housing, get housing, rental housing. We have street disorder that we're dealing with that's very evident for people living in the downtown core especially. Transportation, I joked a little bit about traffic jams, but for some people it's really kind of top of mind. And I think public safety, crime. The city is in the throes of developing a community safety and well-being plan, which will be coming to council in November. We have to reimagine how we use police, how we use bylaw, how we better integrate and coordinate health, addictions, mental health services in partnership with the province. So that will address some of that. I'm almost there, Peter. So social services, I think the downloading is very evident. It will be very interesting to see what happens in the election tonight. But what we find is that provincial ministries are very siloed. They're not well coordinated. They don't come together. We tend to operate with urgency, at the kind of street level of what we're seeing day to day, and we don't see that often in the provincial government realm. Housing, obviously BC housing, where, we didn't build housing for 16 years. The feds got out of housing in the 70s. We have this perfect storm of not building and now trying to catch up. Asset management, I talked a little bit about the costs there. Climate, atmospheric rivers, all of this degrades our assets at a faster rate, so we're having to replace things sooner. Construction costs, we are seeing construction costs today are 50% higher than 6 years ago. And they're increasing by about 5 to 10% a year. And that's it. Thank you.